Hey everyone, and welcome to the New York City College of Technology laboratory procedure videos for the RESD 111 Complete Dentures 1 course. This video will be on in-class articulations. There's also another video within this module about live case articulation. Since we're in class, these articulations will be a little different. To begin, for the class you will need your articulator, your mounting plates, your bite jig or matrix, your master models, occlusion rims, your rubber bowl, and spatula. The first step in articulation should be notching your models. Make sure you notch the base of the models deep enough to act as a key to return the models back to your articulation. Next, have your instructor mark your midline. You can also locate the areas shown here on this video. These areas will be the holder for the rubber band that you will need to place during your articulation. As you see, the rubber band is placed on the notches on the condylar elements in the back of the articulator and rests on that line on your incisal rod. Once the rubber band is placed, the incisal guide pin can be placed into the incisal rod. The rubber band creates an occlusal plane that will aid in the position of the models. You can place a separating medium on the bottom of the models, mix your plaster, and apply it to the mounting plates. Be sure that the plaster enters the retention holes. Once the plaster is thick enough, be sure to stack it high so that the model can balance itself right by the occlusal plane. Be sure to apply plaster to the bottom of the mandibular model and ensure that the plaster enters the notches. Once the plaster has been stacked high enough and has achieved the firmness that allows it to support the model and occlusion rim without sinking, you can position the model and the occlusion rim accordingly. The midline and the incisal edge of the occlusal rim should be pointed at the incisal guide pin, and the plane of the occlusion rim should match the rubber band with the posterior slightly above the plane. Once the model and occlusion rim have been placed correctly, if the plaster is stiff enough, it can now be cleaned with a spatula. You should take caution when performing this task. If the plaster is not stiff enough, it will move the model during the cleanup process. Once the plaster is completely set, the mounting plate and the mount itself can be removed from the articulator and further cleaned under the sink with water or sandpaper. Once the mandibular model is successfully articulated, you can then trade the occlusion rim for the bite jig or matrix given to you by your professor. You can then place your maxillary and secure it into the bite jig. But before articulating your maxillary cast, ensure that your incisal rod is set at 0. This will be your point of origin. Once the articulator is set, you apply plaster to the bottom of the maxillary model as you did to the mandibular, ensuring that the plaster engages the notches created on the bottom of the model. The plaster is then applied to the mounting plates into the retention holes. The plaster is stacked, and the articulator is closed. The same cleanup process is done on the maxillary cast and articulation as was done on the mandibular. It should be noted that this form of articulation is specific to the classroom. Remember that there is not a clinician or a patient, so occlusion rims cannot be adjusted and a bite cannot be given. In order for evaluation purposes, we make it so that we articulate with the bite jig, and your instructor should be the one to adjust your occlusion rims as a doctor would or a clinician in the clinical appointment.